So Jason served as a pilot in one of the most, if not the most elite aviation unit in the world, the 160th Special Operations Unit, also known as the Night Stalkers. So if you can imagine, if you're not familiar with the military, if there's ever a complex and dangerous mission, most likely happening in the middle of the night. That's why they're called the Night Stalkers. These are the guys that are responsible for getting the Special Forces guys and teams into those situations and out of those situations safely. So that's where his background is. And then since leaving the military, he continued to serve by flying medevac missions for his local hospital in Cotter, Arkansas, where he's from, and just retired from that a couple months ago, right?
I'm actually still part
Oh,
time
okay.
right now, so not fully retired, but I'm part time, pretty close to being completely done
Nice,
though.
nice. And at the same time, he was the head of the Planning Commission and also the president of the Chamber of Commerce. And if all that wasn't enough, the primary reason that he's been on this show is because he and his wife Cami and their daughter have built an awesome boutique short-term rental business in his hometown. And just to give you an idea, last time we did this interview, he was in a church that ironically he attended as a child and had been abandoned since then. But he bought it and had just completed rehabbing the whole place and turning it into this awesome boutique short-term rental B&B. So we got a tour of that on the last episode, which I thought was like maybe a year ago. And then I look back and it was episode, I think 78 back in 2021. So, here we are in 2024 and time flies by pretty quickly. But he has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to short-term rentals and building a really cool short-term rental business. And so I think there's going to be a lot of advice and takeaways from this. And then also, even though it sounds like the guy never sleeps, he's in the process of running for the Arkansas House of Representatives to represent his district. So he's right in the middle of that race as well. And the primary's coming up on that in just a couple months. So lots to talk about, but feel free to fill in anything that I might have missed.
No, great job, Kirby. It was an awesome career. Like you, tons of great memories in the military. My last 10 years, as you mentioned, were with 160th, and I just had a wonderful time there. Great group of folks that you're working with, and great mission. So just really exciting. That was where I transitioned, and so I had the opportunity to learn a lot through my transition. And that's when I ended up coming back home to Cotter, as you mentioned, and was able to land an awesome job flying medevac or with one of the companies here, Air. And it was at our local hospital just up the road. So it was only about 45 minutes. And as I began that accidental real estate investment, which I say it was accidental because it really was, how it started was just needed a place to live. And then that turned into tons and tons of learning, which then turned into tons and tons of growing. And that we grew really fast. We scaled. But how we were able to do it was because of systems and processes that I know you are really familiar with as well. You got to make a scalable and sellable business, whether you want to sell it or not. It's not really a business. It's a hobby unless you turn it into a business. And we were dead set on turning it into a business, from long ago, once we started down that road. It was the smartest thing we could ever do. Not saying that everything was perfect. We learned a ton. We made a ton of mistakes, but we had a blast while we were doing it. Even though sometimes it was stressful, and we really did. We created a little business that was a boutique vacation rental business that ended up having, by the time we were finished with it, and I don't say we're finished right now, but by the time we were finished with that iteration, we had 8 vacation rentals of our own, and we had about 7 or 8 more that we were managing for other people, because along the way people saw what we were doing, they loved it, and they wanted help with theirs. And so then we started growing that side of the business, and we just put our systems and processes in place. And like I said, it was organic growth, but it was really exponential, and it was a crazy ride. And we had a blast. We really did.
Nice.
So
Nice. That's awesome. And just to give people perspective then of what your portfolio looks like of those 8 that you own. What type of properties are those?
You bet. So the one that we started with, the one that we bought a place to turn into a house was a 4,000 square foot fourplex when we bought it. It was an apartment building that was a fourplex, but like I told you back then, it was just shy of being a crack house.
Yeah.
So it was a full gut renovation. I was still actually in the Army when we bought it. The plan was to turn it into a triplex. We were going to live upstairs, turning 2 apartments into one, and then having 2 apartments downstairs, one of which was going to be a rental. The other was going to be from my mother-in-law. And then we were building a garage there. And then that's where I really started learning. So that was the first one. That's how we got our name for our company, because when we peel back the layers of that building, we found that it had a ton of architecture, and down below it, it said Potter Block. Well, up above, but down below all those layers that we peeled off, it said Potter Block, and there's a ton of history there of where that name came from. But that became our company name, pottersblock.com. And from there, we grew, picked up another single family home after that, little 3 bedroom, 1 bath that was across from my father's house and the house that I grew up in. And then we fixed that one up, put that one, out there as a rental. We ended up picking up a couple other houses along the way as well that needed fixing up. Various levels of rehab was needed on certain ones. Some were more than others. And then the church popped up. That was another one that we got. And then somewhere along the line, in the middle of all that, we bought the hotel, which back then it was livable. There was a couple rooms that were livable. So we did have our daughter living in one room. We rented out 2 other rooms to people that just needed a place to stay. And the main thing we were really using that building for was we had renovated the laundry room. And so all of our rentals, all of the laundry went right back into that laundry room. And then we had a storage room renovated as well. So we created an awesome process and system that was able to allowed us to turn our properties really easily and streamline with our cleaning team. So we had a mixture, like I said, of mostly single family homes, a couple of the apartments, and then the church, which was a larger one, 5 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. So that's where we were when we spoke last. So that puts us kind of up to date from the last time we spoke.
Yeah. 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 And that's I love that concept too of using the laundry and storage facility, turning a building into a multi-usage. It's obviously it's making you money as a hotel, but then you can use it as a need to fill a need that you have as well, which is kind of what I'm doing in the
Mhm.
building I'm standing in right now. I turned this barn into an office space. We have storage next door for all the Airbnb stuff. And my kids' trampoline in there, which they love. My wife's shop out here. We've got an Airbnb in one corner, a gym in one corner. So I love multi-use spaces like that because you can get so
Mhm.
much value out of it. Um,
It is, yeah.
so
And it
go
was
ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, so the hotel, it was a great spot for that, with that multiple uses. It wasn't in great shape, so it didn't look like anything great on the outside. It didn't look like anything great on the inside, but we needed to get, finished with a couple other smaller projects before we really started digging deep on the hotel, because we knew once we started on that, it was going to be
Yeah.
huge. It was going to be a big project, and we'll get to talking about it here in a little bit too. But that one is now we are near the finish line. We have floors and final trim, and that's really about it. Our floor guy has to come in and do his part, and then our plumber's got to come in and do the top up. But that's really about it.
Nice.
And then that one will be finally finished. So
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And when we spoke in 2001, I mean, that was back when the world was still a little COVID crazy and the market was very different at the time. And so,
mhm.
what's been some of the biggest changes since we last spoke? Like, is there anything you're doing differently now than you did back then?
So great question. And I tell people this, and it was something that I learned, through my transition was be prepared to pivot. Be prepared to pivot because changes happen. Things happen. Just like you said during COVID, the market was nuts. Sometimes it was just like a feeding frenzy. Out here and elsewhere as well. But for me, everything that we always did, the numbers that I crunched in any project that we were picking up, I knew that I was putting it online as a short term rental, but I what I did was my kind of my backstop was if I had to turn it into a long term, I wanted to make sure that it would always work. And so every one of my projects, we always did. We always looked at it on the lens of this is what we're going to have as a short term, but this is what we will do if we need to as a long term. And I never really had an idea of like, why I would turn it to a long term. So we were really enjoying the short term rental space, and we still do. But we did pivot, and we pivoted for a couple different reasons. There's a lot that went into the decision to pivot, and I think I definitely say that God had a piece in it as well, because I think that we don't always know all of the story until we kind of get to peel back a layer of an onion for that as well. So we had kind of made the decision, life wise, that we were going to scale back a little bit. And so one of those reasons that we did, or one of those things we decided to do, was we were going to turn some of our short term into long term, which was going to allow us a few things. It was going to allow us a stabilized income, less work. Unlike Kirby was able to, one of the process systems that he put in place a long time ago was he has somebody else take care of a lot of the stuff that we continue to do. And we were continuing to do it because we financially really couldn't jump forward and have them done. And I think it was really because of so many ongoing projects that we were in the middle of that we were self funding. Had we brought in other funding and brought in investors or something else, we could have done the same thing easily, and we could have just continued to scale and grow like that. But we chose to, financially, it made sense to stabilize the income, and then the other was time. It gave me a huge chunk of my time back with turning some of our short term into long term. The timing was perfect as well, and this was another reason we were looking at doing it. I was getting calls, multiple calls in a day, people needing a long term rental. There was so many short term rentals in our area. I would say it probably 4x'd here for the number of rentals short term that were available from the time I started. We still had the market on being the best. I mean, we were and still are, the desired homes because of what we offer. But there was still, just like anything else, supply demand. It's going to change things for you. So the amount of money that we were bringing in, not that it was ever about money anyway, but the amount that we were bringing in on those short term rentals was not far off of what a long term rental would bring in anyway. And so I looked at it like if I turn these to a long term rental, but a good quality long term rental, and actually offered them as a all inclusive. So the long term rental, I gave people options, just depending on when I found the right renter. Then that right renter, I have one renter that actually has it fully furnished. The rest of them wanted it, empty. They brought their own things, but they also have one check. They pay me, and it's got their electric, their water, their gas, even their Wi-Fi.
Mm,
So they love that, and so it's an all-inclusive rental. And as I mentioned, the timing piece. So because there was a huge demand for long-term rentals, the renter, profile was very robust. So I was actually able to grab, I would say, the cream of the crop,
nice.
and so I didn't have to jump, really fast to try to grab somebody to rent a place. I could really vet them and find the right person, and so that's exactly what we did. We put the right renters in the right spot, kind of like Jim Collins. I don't know if you ever read the book Good to Great. Putting the right person in the right seat of the bus is exactly what we did with this business model. So what we did was we turned ours. Another piece that we kind of pushed back on it, and hold up a hand if I talk too
No,
much
not at
too,
all. It's
Kirby.
great.
But another thing that we did was, and it was really the timepiece, we gave back every rental that we were managing. So we went from, and I know that you never actually went and took other people's rentals. You only did your own portfolio. And I understood why. Like after we were doing it for a while, it was kind of like, man, we're doing a great job and we're the best people to do this. And I wish I could hire somebody that would do this for me because it's worth every penny. But um, that's what we did. We let people know, and they were sad to see us go, but they understood. And some of them went with a larger company, and some of those that had gone with a larger company have left that company because they were really unhappy with how they were treated. And others have just kind of tried to do it themselves, and yet others actually just decided to sell it because it just wasn't worth it for them to mess with it anymore. Um, and I did advise them along the way, but I told them, we just main thing is time. the time piece is why we're not going to take care of anybody else's anymore. So we're only going to do our portfolio, which is where we're at now. I put on the market and filled six of our eight. So we have total of eight currently vacation or eight rentals, six of which are now long term, and then the other two are short term. The church that you mentioned before, it never made sense for us to turn that into a long term, so that's still a short term. And then our little garage renovation that's next to our old house, that it was a garage that we built but turned into a little rental. It's a very cute little single studio apartment. That also stays right now as a short term, but I do have people that come in and stay for quite a while in there just because they really like it. So again, we went, took eight rentals, six of them short term, or six of them went to long term, two to short term, and then now the hotel's just about finished, which will add 12 short term rentals, but it's a little bit different. So and we'll talk about that here. I'll take a break and a breather and let you ask questions and stuff because I know I rambled
No,
for a
I
while.
love all of that. All of that is so good, and the fact that this is why I like having these conversations is because they're honest conversations, and it's the way actual operators are operating and in considerations that people have and moves they're making. I just attended last week this IMN short-term rental conference, and it's mostly like big funds and institutional investors and that sort of thing. And it's so different than the boots on the ground actual operators. Because from that perspective of a fund, they're just looking at a spreadsheet, and it's like they're just going to do the thing that ekes out the highest return. But when you're operating your own business, it's great to be able to pivot. It's great to be able to, you can
Mhm.
make money so many different ways in rentals in general, and short-term rentals and long-term rentals. And so I'm a huge proponent of what you just talked about, making sure it works as a long-term rental first and foremost, so that you could pivot to a long-term rental or a furnished long-term rental or a medium-term rental or so many different options,
Mhm.
as opposed to just looking through the lens of high-end vacation rental in the most competitive areas where people gravitate toward, and that's
Mhm.
the only thing you could ever use it toward or use it for. So there's so many different ways to make money in this business. It's great to hear that you're able to change it to suit your lifestyle, because that's what it's all
Mhm.
about. Like, this is the whole reason you get into this business, is to support the lifestyle that you want. And
That's
so
it.
that's awesome. And great renters you brought up. I mean, from a long-term rental perspective, in my opinion, having owned a lot of long-term rentals in the past, that is the one thing that makes or breaks a rental
Mhm.
portfolio. And I think being able to screen and see that, okay, there's this huge demand, I can pick the cream of the crop. Now it's probably not super management intensive from that standpoint, because you have great
Mhm.
renters in place. And so that's another great point that you brought up. So all that is wonderful. So I'm always interested then to hear, like, when you first started this, what was your vision for what you wanted to get out of it? Like, what did you um, what was your goal at that point? And then after getting into the business and doing this and learning lessons learned and having these experiences, how has that evolved to what your vision is today?
Great question, and that's one that we all have to look at. And you know, as I've said early on, accidental real estate investor. That's definitely what I say that I am, because we didn't have this huge vision of let's create a company, let's create a bunch of rentals, let's do this or do that. I literally was retiring from the army, took a job with Airvac, which was a great job, and was fixing up a place to live in, and then was going to have one little apartment, which I thought was great because then I was going to have a little residual income. And that was when I started to watch podcasts like yours, listen to, see what's going on. There was, Bigger Pockets and, tons of other forums. I started reading voraciously. I was grabbing, constantly getting new books because, and I was literally learning because of that one apartment. because I saw that as well. Hey, I want to maximize my revenue on that, and I know that there's benefits because of taxes, and so I'd look into books that would tell me about taxes, and that's when I started to see, well, hey, if one does this, then I picked up that little 3 bedroom, 1 bath. It's like, okay, well, now two does this. And then my mother in law didn't move downstairs. She had to live upstairs with us. So now I had two apartments to rent downstairs. So it's like, okay, well, now I have three. That was when it really started kind of hitting me. When we went from having one apartment to three, everything I was reading in the books and everything, I was like, this is leaning towards a financial security for my family. I mean, our family, we were at that point already. Our kids were gone, out of the house as far as, they're grown. We don't have any young kids. So it's just my wife and I. But I mean, we still, I think, okay, we started looking at like, well, we could have financial stability and security where we have a retirement from the Army. And then we have, homes will be getting paid for by renters or whatever that looks like at that point. And so that's when we really started to make a goal of, okay, let's make a realistic goal and let's set a long-term goal, because this isn't a get rich quick scheme by any stretch. You know that, and anybody that's in it for at least a little bit understands that real estate is not get rich quick most of the time. It is, buy real estate and wait. And but we did start really looking at it from that lens of, okay, what do we look like 20 years from now? We could be 60 years old or 50 or whatever, and no longer working. And so that dream of leaving the Aerovac job was always out there for me. It was hard because it was great money coming in, and so I hated to give it up because I knew we wanted to continue to grow. But I really, the time away from my wife and the time, work week on, week off, I wanted to give that up because it wasn't much different than what we had left in the military for so many years. So our goal was always, spending time together. Cammie and I, my wife and I, we've been married for 27 years now,
Nice.
and we still are best friends, and we love spending time together. And that's what I wanted to do, is get us to a point where we could, go visit grandkids whenever they do come, and we can't, or we wouldn't be stuck doing something, and we had that freedom financially as well as time, and that was really our goal. And so how it really changed was just opportunity. If opportunity arose and it made sense, then I would add that opportunity into our portfolio and just continue to grow, with that in mind. Of eventually we will have that financial security and stability as well as time freedom,
In
and that goal has never changed. If you look at my calendar, you'd probably argue and say you have no freedom of time, but it's all about how you use that
yeah,
time. So we do have some time freedom. We
yeah,
do.
yeah, and with that in mind, like with that being the goal, how do you evaluate opportunity now when it comes your way?
Yeah, and it's now I still kind of look at them all from the same lens that I did before. Number one, that 1% rule, which I know we've talked about before and you've heard about before, I still use that as kind of like a really quick, broad stroke. Right now, I would definitely say I'm not in acquisition mode. And I've told that to my family for a long time. However, even a while back, I did pick up a property, and it was just because it worked out. It made sense. Right now, though, it's got to really, really make sense, because now I'm really looking from the lens of time, not necessarily just money. It's also time. I might be able to put the money together or borrow money or whatever, and everything would work out. But it's about, okay, what is it going to take away from me time wise in order to get it done? And so I really have buckled down on what I will accept and what I won't, and not being out hammering it looking for anything is very relaxing,
Hmm.
actually, because there's plenty of other things that I've got that'll take my time, but not evaluating properties constantly. That's one that I'm not doing. So that's kind of a nice thing that I get to enjoy.